Okay,
Perfect.
got it. Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Hi, everyone. I warmly welcome you to today's session, which we would be focusing on diving into Azure virtual machines and Azure storage. And thank you once again to the entire user group team, Sanjeev, Goloknath, and everyone for giving me the opportunity to interact with you guys today and present on this topic. Um, so, quickly giving a brief introduction about myself before we start. So, I am Navika Chhauda, and I'm currently working as an Azure cloud engineer in an European based company. I'm also currently a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional in Developers Technology, also LinkedIn Top Voice in Cloud Computing. Along with being a BTech graduate in computer science, I'm also currently a graduate student at Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. Tech communities has always been an integral part of my journey so far. Um, Prior to being a MVP, I was a Microsoft Student Ambassador, a Gold Microsoft Student Ambassador for good 3.5 years, wherein I got some great opportunities to interact with like-minded peers from all over the globe. I got some opportunity to speak at Microsoft Ignite, judge Microsoft Imagine Cup Junior, mentoring people at hackathons, such as being a mentor at Tech Together Hackathon at Seattle and Chicago. Along with doing all these things, I have been into community service for the last 9.5 years now. And I'm very passionate about using hashtag tech for good, what I call. That means using technology for a good cause. So I've been into empowering the vulnerable section of society, like visually impaired students as well, with Microsoft tools and technology. And yeah, for the work that I have been doing, I have been fortunate enough to be recognized with some Inter Book of Record or Women's Achiever of India. So yeah, that's a little about myself. Please feel free to connect with me over the social media accounts like LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. I also host my podcast, which I hope I try my best that they are weekly podcast. That is Tech Chat with Navika. So basically, that's all about. I invite experts from technical field who have some great amount of experience. 15, 20 years of working experience, and we discuss some Azure related topic or some general technical topic. So yeah, that's pretty insightful. So if you wish, you can have a look at it as well on my YouTube channel. Now, let's get started with today's session. Setting up the agenda for today. So, firstly, I would be giving you an overview of Azure. I'm sure you would be having that, but still, to set a base for it. Post that, today we would be concentrating on virtual machines and Azure storage, and henceforth we would be deeping dive into it. Uh, in From the perspective of virtual machines, we would be understanding what and why, and then how. How do we use it actually? We would be having certain practical demos as well, being creation of VM, creating a web server out of it. Similarly, we would be diving into Azure storage as well. We would be quickly giving a glance different type of Azure storage that we have in Azure. And post that, we would be going ahead and looking into some, again, practical demos of how do we work with blob storage and Azure files, etc. So that's pretty much how your next 50 minutes or 48 minutes would look like. All right. So, getting started with the very first question as to what is Azure. Um, Taking a step back, we already know what cloud computing is all about. It is all about delivery of computing services over the internet. And we have a lot many cloud computing platforms in the market, and the companies who provide us with those services are actually known as cloud providers. On the similar lines, we have something known as Microsoft Azure, that is a cloud computing platform by Microsoft. The best part of using Azure is that we just have to focus on building, testing, and deploying our applications without thinking about the maintenance of the hardware, etc. It provides us with more than 200 plus services in different categories. If I'm not wrong, there are like 18 or 18 plus categories in which these services are actually divided into. Um, and similarly, as we talk about Azure services or Azure categories, that is where Azure Compute and Azure Storage comes into the picture. What we would be focusing in today's session. As we talk about Azure Storage, let's start from the previous one. Um, Basically, the best part is Azure provides us with the facility of storing different types of data in different types of ways. If you have a text file, you can store it in a particular way. If you have a bit more formatted data, you can store it in a different way that we would be discussing in detail. And yeah, so let's get started with Azure Compute. All right. So before starting, I do have one slide that states the benefits of cloud computing, or you can also take this as the why question as to why firstly go into cloud computing at the first place. We are already aware of these factors, but quickly just glancing through it. The very first best part of using cloud computing is that it is pretty cost effective. So if you see your capex, that is the capital expenditure is pretty much less when we go in for any cloud computing platform in general as well, right? Whereas our OPEX is high. OPEX is high as in, OPEX comes into the picture when we talk about cloud computing. That is the operational cost. So we really don't have to make that one big fat amount of, investment at the first place in hardware, etc. when we talk about cloud computing as compared to the on-prem environment that we have, right? The on-premises environment that we have. So the best part of cloud computing is it follows a pay-as-you-go model. That means you have to pay exactly for the services that you are using, right? Nothing more and nothing less. And thus, it makes your working pretty cost efficient because at the end of the day, every business wants to be profitable and to be cost efficient as well. And cloud computing enables us to achieve that. The next up is scalability. So we have this option of scaling up and down our resources according to our needs and requirement. Uh, Hypothetically, if you have, um, as we will be talking about a virtual machine today, so let's take that as an example. If you have set up the size of a virtual machine which caters to 32 GB, and after 1 month we find okay, no, we're not even using that, so let's just get it down to 16 GB. So you do have that option of doing, right? And that is what scalability is all about, scaling up or down. And thus you have two types of scalings. One is the vertical and the horizontal scaling. Vertical scaling means basically adding more memory, more CPU, RAM, etc. to your existing resource. The second option is the horizontal scaling. That means multiplying the instances of a particular resource. If you see from the industry perspective as well, it is rather always better to go in for the horizontal scaling at times, like again not generalizing it, but it is better because that also helps in your availability, and in case there is a failure at one particular resource, you always have the other one to be dependent on, right? So that is what scalability is all about. Then you have elasticity. So elasticity is basically automatic scaling in a way, right? Let's consider a situation. Let's suppose wherein you have a website of yours, okay, and it has suddenly been featured in some a media channel or somewhere, and suddenly over the night you have got some tremendous amount of traffic, right? Now if you were not in cloud, you really don't know that how to handle that traffic. But that is not the case now. If you are in cloud and you're hosting that website on cloud and you have sudden rise in the traffic, then with the help of elasticity, your resources to handle that particular traffic would automatically be increased. Um, Once your traffic comes back to normal as that of the previous day, your resources, the ones that have been added, they'll come back to the normal state. That is what elasticity is all about. It is current, yes, with any cloud computing platform. You just have to focus on building, testing, and deploying your applications and not that much about the maintenance, underneath maintenance of it, right? Maintenance of the hardware or software updation, that's not that much considered. It is pretty much reliable. And as we talk about reliability, security also plays an equal role, right? In when we talk about security, So that particularly means that it provides us with disaster recovery solutions, etc., etc. So our data is pretty much encrypted and protected when we use cloud computing platforms, and it is global. Yes, it does have, especially if we talk about Azure, so we have its data centers almost all over the globe, and thus provides us high availability. So now I hope we are clear as to what and why part of the cloud computing. I purposely took out 5 minutes to explain this so that even if there's someone in the meeting who is not that much aware of it, so it's good to have a bit basic knowledge of it and then moving forward. Um, Now, as I told you, these are the benefits of cloud computing, and now we would be diving into the main topic, that is Azure virtual machines and Azure storage. Now, as we talk about Azure virtual machines, right? So let's understand what Azure virtual machines or VMs is all about. So they are nothing but they are software emulations of a physical computer. It's pretty much like, in terms of how it looks like, it is pretty much similar to that of a physical computer. So it actually contains a virtual processor, it contains a memory, certain network resources, and storage. So these are actually, once you create a virtual machine on Azure, certain byproducts are also automatically created. And so that is what actually a virtual machine includes. And a virtual machine basically hosts an operating system in it, right? So it could be Linux, it could be Windows. And as I go on to the practical part of it, so I'll let you know as to how different type of images are provided by Azure to us, and we can install that into our virtual machine, so it gives us a feel as if we are working on our own physical computer. And also we are able to install different softwares in a virtual machine, so its working is pretty much same as that of a physical computer. So now, till now, whatever explanation I have given, I've mostly told you about the similarities, right? What are the similarities between a virtual machine and a physical computer? But here comes the question: then, what is the difference? So you see, virtual machine is nothing but a software, actually, right? That we have to sort of that we have to host on our physical computer. So that is what it is all about. So it's like a software wherein we can actually run and deploy our applications, and this is basically hosted on a physical computer. So think it of that way. So you see how much it makes our solutions pretty much efficient when we go in for a VM, because instead of buying different physical computer, now what we are doing is that we have one single physical computer, hypothetically, and there we are hosting, let's suppose, multiple Azure VMs. And then we can perform the pretty much same tasks that we can on a physical computer that we can do on a virtual machine as well. For instance, maybe, running an application. So you can do that on a VM, because if you don't know till when you want to use that, or if you want to test certain things, you can do that on a VM easily, right? So that here comes the difference as to what is the difference between a physical computer and that of a virtual machine, and how it makes your working more efficient. And you also have pretty much good control over your VM in terms of resources, etc. Um, Now, as I said, once you create a virtual machine that we are going to be doing in a couple of minutes, um, there are certain byproducts, or side resources that are sort of created along with it. So what are those? The first resource that gets created is a VNet, or what you call as a virtual network, right? So in Azure, if you really want to sort of want the resources to communicate with each other, so we need to, that's where virtual network comes into the picture. And similarly, if we want, uh, virtual machines to interact with each other, etc., etc. So we need a VNet in place, and thus it's the VNet within which we have a VM, and that is the reason VNet automatically gets created. Then we have NSG, that is the network security group, and a disk that automatically gets created. So network security group is something wherein we can actually define our rules, that is the networking rules that we want for the VM to be enabled or disabled. That is what we can actually define in the NSG, that is the network security group. Hypothetically, if I want to enable the internet in my virtual machine, or on the other hand, disable it. So I can define a rule there in NSG, and that's going to be configured on the virtual machine directly. Similarly, we have disks that are also created. So one is the OS disk, that is the operating system. So obviously, whatever operating system your VM is currently running on, um, that disk, OS disk, automatically gets created. Also, you have one more type of disk, that is the data disk. So it is always recommended, if you're storing any data in your VM, always store it in a data disk. If something, there is a failure, any issue with the VM, you can always take that data disk and you can attach it to a absolutely new virtual machine, so that your data would be safe. So if you want to store and user data or something, you can go ahead and you can do that in a data disk. And then, yes, you have IPs created, that is public IP and a private IP. So that are basically the products that are created along with it. Now, the next up is, as I've already, I think, covered this in the previous slide as well. That is why go in for an Azure VM at the first place. So definitely the very first reason that I've mentioned is deploying and testing. You can run your application. Also, you can use it to extend your data center as well. So these are a couple of reasons as to why you should consider going into an Azure VM. And now, understanding one important thing is, before creating a virtual machine, right? We have to keep certain points in our mind, and we have to, there are certain factors that we should be taking into consideration before going in and creating an Azure virtual machine. The very first thing is naming, right? And that's not actually just, I'm not sort of keeping it just to Azure virtual machine, but in general, if you're creating an infrastructure in Azure, right, wherein you have multiple resources in it and there's integration between them. So the very important first thing is the naming convention that you follow. Especially if you're working, professionally in a company or something, naming convention of the resources is extremely important. So be particular of the name, so that it is easy to identify the resource and what does it belongs to. So keep these two things in mind while creating a name or assigning a name to a particular resource. The next step is the location. So where you want to host your virtual machine, right? In which area, in which region, that's the correct uh, way to say that. So I'm going to show that to you, but you have multiple regions wherein you can assign your, wherein you can host your virtual machine. The next up is the size or SKU, what we call, of your resource in general, right? So that is very important. So the more the size of the virtual machine, the more would be the price. So here comes, you should be very clear of the reason that why are you creating your VM at the first place, right? Is it just for a demo purpose? For example, if I'm going to create today, I know I'm going to delete my virtual machine after after today's session. So I'm going to use the minimum SKU. Why should I pay extra for it, right? And I'm going to delete that also afterwards. On the other hand, if you're doing for some, if you're doing it in your company, and let's suppose you're creating a VM for your production environment, now you know that how much load it's going to take up, right? So you need to assign a SKU accordingly. The next up is operating system, or what you call is like the image that you have to select for the virtual machine. So definitely that's defined if you're going for a Linux, you want to go for a Windows VM, so that you can have a look at, and depending on you, you can choose that operating system. And then the last point is you need a resource group. So it is the resource group in general in Azure that basically, it's like a container, it's like a bag. You can imagine it like that, and then all your resources are contained within that container. I'm sure I really don't have to explain much about that. Moving forward, now before we actually dive into the practical part of it, here is a quick, very popular image that I've put in over here. That is a screenshot of the infrastructure of how an Azure infra actually looks like. So we have the management groups at the top, right? So management. What is a management group? So management group is actually, it is a group of subscriptions. That is what is management group all about, right? And within each management group, you can have one single subscription. Works perfectly fine. Else, you can have a group of subscriptions within it, right? So firstly, you have a management group, then you have that is a group of subscriptions. Post that we have subscriptions. Now, each subscriptions can have multiple resource groups within it. And then each resource group can have multiple resources within it. So this is the hierarchy, basically infra hierarchy, what you wish to say, that we follow in Azure. So it's not just about a virtual machine. Any resource that you create in Azure, it should be within a particular resource group, and that resource group should definitely be within a subscription, right? So that is the hierarchy that we follow in general, and that obviously we're going to be following in today's demo as well. All right, then demo time. So I am okay. So whenever we create, yeah, Sanjeev, do you want to say something?
So, hey, fantastic info. Really quick couple questions before you get into the demo, what would be the difference between a VM and Windows 365, do you know? Because we can get Windows 365 as a service as well. So, do
Mm-hmm.
you know the difference between the two?
Well, as I already told you, so I'm not too sure if I would be able to answer your question right now. So, Sanjeev, would that be okay if I answer that towards the end? Because that's how I
Yeah,
prefer. So maybe that
most
would be
certainly.
covered.
No issues,
Yeah.
no issues at all. I just wanted, before you got into, just wanted to put it there and then we get to the end and do questions. Yeah, super. Go ahead, man.
All right. If that's fine with the audience, we can actually take it up towards the end because I would be covering certain things. So maybe that
Absolutely.
also gets covered,
Yeah,
right?
go ahead, man. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Um, so yeah, coming back to the demo part of it. So now whenever you create resources on Azure, right, you have different ways as to how you can do that. You can do it via Azure PowerShell, right? You can do it via Azure CLI, and then you have the Azure portal via which you can create resources, correct? Um, so the demo that I would be doing today would be with the help of Azure portal. Also, you have ARM templates, or what people usually are using right now, that is biceps, via which we can create direct resources. So just to let you know, ARM template basically follows a very declarative syntax, wherein you just have to write sort of one line and then you really don't have to worry about the structure of your resource, right? So that is what template actually follows. And yeah, so these are different ways as to how you create your resources, but today we are going to be doing via Azure portal. um Now, I am sure Azure, using Azure portal is pretty much easy. In case you don't have, so you should be needing a subscription to use that at the first place. In case you do not have, you can just go on to, on the net, search for, you can also go in for some free credits initially to use, maybe 200 or something. So you can just search about it and you can enable that in case you just want to figure out and play around as to how Azure portal works like. But it's pretty much user friendly, and your resource gets deployed um in just a couple of minutes, right? So this is how your Azure portal looks like. You have your services over here, right? And if you want to go to the all services, as I told you, we have different categories. I assume there are 18, could be more or less, not less. I'm sure it's going to be more. And then you have different services within each of the categories. Now, as we talk about Azure virtual machines, so quickly head on over there and let's create it. So either you can search it over here, or since I've already used it, so it shows up over here. So I go on to virtual machine. I already have one in place for Docker purposes, but I would be creating a new one right now. So I go to create Azure virtual machine. As I told you, there are a couple of things that you have to do. You have to select a resource group in case you have already created. Else, for today's demo, I'm gonna create a new resource group. that is by the name test RG. After that, virtual machine name. So this name should be unique. So I've taken up test VM, and the next what I'm going to be doing is so you have these availability options, right? So I've gone in for availability zone, else you have availability set, and you have scale sets, right? uh what we are going to be doing right now is I'm going ahead and I'm going in for availability zone. So availability zone is basically, if you see a region in Azure, right, it is divided into different availability zones. So basically each data center, you have separate availability zones, and so we are going in for that availability option at the first place. Security type, Azure has off lately launched, like it's not too new, but yeah, it's been a year if I'm not wrong. That trusted launch VMs have been, what they call ATL has been launched. I think it's that's pretty much new feature to provide some extra amount of security if need be. And it caters to the Gen 2 VMs, that is the generation 2 VMs, but I'm going in for the basic one because today's session is you know, basic about virtual machines and storage, and we're not diving that much deep, but yeah, we're just covering a basic portion of it. And thus I have gone in for the standard one. And as we talk about the image, so you see you have different types of images available for you. What we are going to be doing right now is, let's suppose I would be creating a Windows Server 2019 data center, right? I select this. Now, the next thing that we are going to be doing, as I told you, we have an option of sizes, right? So if I go to see all size, you see we have these different types of sizes available. We have different series with us, B series, D series, and so on and so forth. And you also get to know the amount of CPUs that have been assigned to it. And also you get to know about uh, 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 right, you get to know about the GB that that particular size is going to cater to. And after that, you're going to be getting to know about the cost, right, uh, of that particular size. And this cost is on the monthly basis. But here comes one important point. When I create the VM, you'll see I'll get to know about the cost that I'm getting per hour. So after like 30 minutes or 25 minutes, the session is going to get over. I'm going to delete this resource, right? So I just have to pay for like 1 hour cost, that is 6 rupees or something. I guess it's going to be if I go in for a B2MS skew, right? So yeah, so we have, as the skew increases, as you see the GBs are increasing, the cost also increases. That's pretty much makes sense. um and therefore it's very important whenever you go in for choosing a SKU, you should be knowing the purpose behind creating a particular resource in Azure, not just talking about a virtual machine, talking about an app service as well in that case, or any other resource. So be very, very careful and be sure about the reason why are you creating, and which SKU actually caters to it caters to. So yeah, I'm just going ahead with the B2MS, which is pretty much common. After that, quickly, two things are required: um, a username and a password. This usually happens with me. I so I have selected. I've set the password, the username, and after that I am okay. I select the inbound ports. We can select it right now as well. Also, when the VM is created, we have, as I told you, NSG, and we can make the changes over there, but I've just done it here itself. Now, after that, you have different panels as well. You have the panel of disks, you have panel of, if you want to sort of make this OS disk. So these are different types of, redundant storage options that we get to know. It is premium SSD, standard SSD, HDD, etc. I am just going for a premium SSD one right now. We also have an option which I've currently checked. That is, if I delete the VM, I can automatically, these OS disks get deleted. Then this is platform managed key that I've selected. You don't have the option of selecting the customer managed key. That is known as CM case in Azure. In this particular disk. Then you have different options of networking. What I'm doing currently is an automatic VNet gets created while I create the VM. Else, you also have an option of creating a VNet and selecting that. So that is also pretty much possible, but I'm not doing that. I'm just going ahead with the default virtual network. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. You can assign tags to your virtual machine in case you wish to. I'm skipping that as of right now. That's not something that we have to care about. And that's it. Then I'm just quickly reviewing and creating. While that happens, a particular validation happens. Within a second, the validation will get passed as it has now. And you can see the rate of this particular virtual machine is like 6.5 rupees INR, right? So I just have to pay this much for an hour. You can quickly cross-check the information and then you can create your virtual machine. So this deployment approximately takes around 1 minute or so. So let this happen first. And I'm going to take the question towards the end so that there are chances that your questions already get answered while I explain, because we have actually 20 minutes or so. So I'll try to cover as much as possible. And post that towards the end, feel free to ask me questions over here, or you can reach out to me later on as well. I'll be more than happy to answer. So as I told you, certain other resources also gets created along with the main virtual machine. So it is network interfaces, your VNet, your virtual network gets created, NSG gets created, a public IP via which we would be doing the RDP to it with the help of a public IP. So these are the 4 things that get created. So let's wait for a couple of seconds. All right, so our virtual machine has been created. Now we go into the virtual machine. Now, before accessing the virtual machine, if we see it says that the test VM agent status is not ready. So what usually happens, our virtual machines run on certain agents that are assigned by Azure, right? And it's not currently ready. So that does not mean that there is a problem with our creation, but it usually happens. So the best way to troubleshoot it is just restart your virtual machine. 95% of the times, your a restart would solve the issue. If it wouldn't, then we'll see what to do next. But I guess a restart would do the job. So we are restarting the virtual machine. So this is the notification bar. It basically lets us know if our particular deployment has succeeded or failed. So I think the restart has happened now. Let's do a quick hard refresh and see if it is better now. Yeah, so now you see we are not able to see the issue. So this simple restart actually works. Now the next thing that we're going to be doing is we are going to be connecting to this VM. So there are different ways as to how you can connect to a virtual machine. We are going to be doing it via RDP. So I do a Windows run, right? And where is the public guys? IP not assigned to it. So we get a public IP assigned to a virtual machine, which I cannot see right now. Here it is. It's come up. Yeah. So I'm doing a Windows R, right? Um, and I do a RDP to it. So I have copied the public IP because that got created, if you recall, and I'm just connecting to it. It's going to ask for my username and password, what I set. I hope I remember my password, which I usually forget. Yeah. And now I'm connecting to the virtual machine. Then you see the magic. So I'm bringing it from my other screen to this screen. So it usually takes like a 30 seconds or so to start. So our server manager now is just getting set it up. So let's just wait for that. So you see a virtual machine pretty much looks just like your physical computer, right? So you have all the things you see. You have a file explorer. You can also install softwares and if you wish to, depending on the purpose why you've created a VM. So now this pretty much looks the same as how our physical computer looks like, right? Now the next thing that we have to do is we have to create a web server. So let's quickly do that. So I go into the server manager of the virtual machine. And how am I going to do that is you get an option of adding roles and features. So I click on that, go to next, next, next. And here I'm going to select IIS. I'm going to add that as a feature. Going on to next, next. It's pretty much simple. You don't have to do anything else. Just keep on clicking on next and then install it. So this installation, I assume, is going to take 1.5 minutes, and maybe because we are running a little bit short of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize this time. Let's minimize this and go onto the Azure portal now. Now I'm back on my Azure portal, and I quickly want to show you what all parameters or options do you have on your virtual machine plane, right? So we have an option of networking over here. And this is what we call actually the NSG, right? This test NSG has been basically assigned to our virtual machine. And here is where we can actually handle the inbound, the outbound security rules. In case now, so what happens? Obviously, security and cost, these are the two most important factors of any infrastructure, right? So when businesses move into cloud, their main two aim is to keep their infra secure and have save cost as much as possible, and that is the main two reasons why businesses actually move into cloud and even in Azure. So when you talk about this from the security perspective, if you see anyone literally can right now get into this VM, right? Because if you see the source is any and the destination is also any. But if I want to make it, if I really want to add that one extra layer of security and I can give those, if I just want, okay, only Navika's IP should be able to access or RDP into this particular VM, so I can set that over here. And similarly, if you're working in a team and you want only your team members, in your company should be able to access this particular VM. So in that case, you can just allow those particular IP addresses over here and block the rest. Do that in deny mode or something of that sort. And similarly, you have HTTP enabled, right? And etc. etc. If you want, you can enable or disable the internet. Everything happens over here. So these are the inbound and output security ports, right? That you can set up over here. The next up is, okay, the activity log. I hope you already know that. So in case you've created a VM, like I restarted, so whatever activities that you're doing in your VM, right, that is what is reflected over here in the activity log. Then you have access control, that is the IAM. Maybe you want to provide and access to your virtual machine. I'm talking about if you, let's suppose if you're working in a company, right, and you want some other team member to just get onto this particular VM and not any other resource of your Azure subscription, and that you can provide this particular IAM access. You can add a role so that that person can just, for example, access only this VM particularly, for safety reasons. And then here also you have different type of options, um, as to what type of role you want to provide, a contributor role, a reader role, an owner role, like that, right? So yeah, that's what IAM is all about access control management. Then here comes the disks. As I told you, you have a data disk and you have an OS disk. Data disk you can add if you wish to. Currently, I don't have any data disk as such. I just have one OS disk, right? That was premium SSD that automatically got created, and it has a platform managed key. That is the encryption way. You can go in for a CMK, but that wasn't possible when I showed you. Then you have sizes, that is this queues. Again, you have an option even after creation, you can, get it up or down. And the moment you resize it, there's going to be a little downtime, maybe downtime as in, a restart of your VM is maybe going to happen. So you can always do that. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. Quickly hovering down and you see a monitoring section over here. This is application insights. That is a separate monitoring tool of Azure. So you can actually link up your VMs and all your different resources to application insights, and you can check how it's performing. What I'm going to show you is the metrics. So if you want to see that how much CPU has been consumed or remaining, so you can do with the help of this. You can quickly have a look at it, and you'll get to know, okay, this is the amount of CPU that has been consumed by our virtual machine. And accordingly, maybe after a month, you see, okay, this is how your VM is performing, and this is the amount of CPU it has been utilizing. And then you can take a decision that, okay, I've gone in for a 32 GB and I don't need that. I'm just using, let's suppose, 10 GB a month. So you can always, get it down and scale down and get it to 15 GB or something of that sort. Um, I'm not going into each of the details, right? Because it's too much then. The next one is export template. So you see this is basically a JSON format that is an ARM template of your virtual machine. So as I told you, you have different ways of deploying resources to Azure, and one of the way is ARM templates as well. So at the back end, if you see an ARM template of resource, I'm not just talking about a virtual machine. It could be any other. It could be storage or whatsoever, logic app and all. Your ARM templates automatically gets created. So basically, how I've created here on Azure, it's same, resource deployment template that has been created, but this is an ARM template. So yeah, that's pretty much a quick navigation of how Azure virtual machines look on the portal. Uh, Now going back into the virtual machine, and you see our installation is succeeded. So we had added IIS as a feature, right, for the web server. It has been succeeded now. Next, what we do is I'm closing this, and now I go onto the file explorer of my virtual machine. Oops, no. Let me take this to the screen and get it back, because I guess it's using the toolbar of my on-prem machine. Just hold on. Oops, I guess I'll have to share my other screen with you guys. Okay. I hope it is visible. Correct. So this is my virtual machine, and I go into the file explorer of it. I go to the C drive of the machine, of the virtual machine. I go to initpub, I go to www root. So this is a particular path that I'm following. You see 1, 2 files over here, which we can delete. And here what I'm going to do is I am going to create a new file. Okay, a text document. I wanted to put a proper HTML code, but I'll have to go back. So maybe I'll just put something like that. Okay, so the naming is index.html. I go inside, I say, I'm not writing anything. So you can put a good HTML code and, with some good CSS and all in it. You can feel free to do that. How you how to do that. But I'm just writing a simple, a line in a text document. Right now, though I've written index.html, but I can see the type is still text documents. Let me convert it into HTML. Oh, yeah. Okay. So what I've done is in this particular, inside the virtual machine, this particular path, I have created index.html, an HTML document, and that is it. And I've written, hey, welcome to today's session on Azure. Now I'm going to again stop sharing my screen. I'm so sorry about this, but I don't know what's the issue with my two screens. Right? And now what I'm going to do is I take the public IP address of my virtual machine and I am running, I'm accessing this public IP via internet. Let's see what happens. So see, whatever I wrote there, okay, the spelling of welcome is wrong, sorry. Hey, welcome to today's session on Azure. So what I wrote there on the VM, right, on that particular text document, an HTML document in that particular route, it's being reflected over here in this public IP. Right? So that is like how you can actually create a web server. That's what is called creating a web server via a virtual machine. Please, you can beautify this, you can make it really nice, it's like give it a website look. But yeah, you can do that. But this is very simple. I had to be very quick. Now the next thing that what we are going to be doing is we're quickly going to go into Azure Storage and understand a little bit about what Azure Storage is all about. That is the next topic, right? Okay, so I'll try to be quick here. So what so let's understand Azure Storage as to what and why part of it, and then we'll get into the how part of it, right? So what is Azure Storage all about? So Azure Storage basically helps us in storing different types of data in different types of ways, right? Now, what are the different types of Azure Storage that we have that we're going to be discussing in the next slide, maybe, or next to next? But let's understand that why should we go ahead with Azure Storage. So it provides us with the benefits, let's say, of availability, scalability, accessibility, and security. So data in Azure is basically Azure storage is encrypted, and thus it's pretty much secure. It is highly available because we have different redundancy options that we would be discussing in a couple of minutes. That is LRS, ZRS, uh, geo redundant storage, GRS, etc. So basically, our data is depending on the redundancy option that we are selecting. It is replicated in different locations according to that, and thus it makes it highly available. And that also caters to disaster recovery, or all these stuff. Then that in case one a region has a certain failure, then in case we have gone in for a redundancy option wherein our data is replicated in the other region, then our data is absolutely safe, right? That's like a backup. It is scalable, and then it is accessible because it's highly available, and thus it is accessible from at large. So yeah, that is the reason why you should go in for an Azure storage, and these are a couple of benefits. Now, understanding the different types of Azure storage, so you have Azure blobs, files that we would be quickly doing a practical on. Then you have Azure queues, tables, and disks. Now, what is Azure Blob? So that's basically used to store your unstructured data. When I say unstructured, we know what it could be. It could be pictures, it could be text, binary data, right? It is also, you have an option of accessing it via the internet as well, that we're going to be doing today. And the next up is Azure Files. So this is basically it is used to manage the file share for cloud, and it basically works on the SMB protocol. Then we have Azure Queues. So this basically stores the messages, and it's like a medium of like it's like a messaging store for the applications that you have on Azure. So that is what Azure Queues is. We're not going to be going in depth into it. Then you have Azure Tables. So Azure Tables is it is used to use schemaless. It's a schemaless storage for structured data. So it is in the form of rows and columns, and then you have your partition keys, etc., etc., defined over there. If I get time, I'll quickly show that to you on the portal. And then you have Azure Disks. We have already spoken about the OS and the data disk in the Azure VMs a couple of minutes back, and you know how disk works, and what are the different type of disks that we have. That is the OS disk, that is pertaining to the operating system. Then we have the data disk. It is always recommended to store your data or use the data whatsoever it is in the data disk, which is a separate entity altogether, and then you can attach that disk to a new VM altogether to replicate it, right? So it is good to save your data in data disks. So that are the different types of storages in Azure. Now, before getting into any different type of storage type, uh, we have to create a storage account at the first place, and post that within it you have different types of storage. So we have and when we create a storage account, we have an option of redundancy options. That is that how when you want to replicate your data, right? So we have LRS, we have ZRS, GRS, and GZRS. So locally redundant storage, it provides you the least amount of availability. You see, if it's just for testing purpose, like today, I'm going to create a LRS redundancy option storage account. So basically here your data is simply replicated thrice in a physical location in a particular region. That is it. In zone redundant storage, your data is basically replicated into an availability zone 3 times. So that makes it a bit more better than LRS. So it's like one level high than LRS. Then you have geo redundant storage, that is the GRS. And what this does is actually it sort of replicates your data firstly synchronously in your primary region, and then also asynchronously on your secondary region. And this is the best if you're actually working in a huge infrastructure, and then you have a lot of load, etc., etc., and you have very what do you say, very important data to be saved in Azure storage. That is when you should go in for a GRS, because in case there is a failure at one region, you always have the secondary region as a backup in that case. And then GZRS, that is the geozone redundant storage. Not going into it, it is actually the geological thing of ZRS that I just explained. Now the next quick up is starting with the blob containers. So how it actually works is that you have to create a storage account. Within that, you have to create containers, and then within each containers, you can have multiple blobs, right? So that is the structure it actually follows. Let me just quickly complete this, and then only we move on over on to the Azure portal. Now, while we create a blob storage, right? So blob storage has these different type of access tiers in it: hot, cool, and archive. Hot access tier basically means that if you really want to frequently, you know, access the data, that's when you go in for a hot access tier. If you want to, let's suppose access the data once in a month on your blob, so then you can choose the cool access tier. And archive is like if you want to, let's suppose, access your data once in 180 months, right? Sorry, not 180 months, 180 days. That is like in 6 months, so almost. So that is when you go in for the archive access. That means when you're rarely accessing your blob storage. All right. So firstly, as I said, we have to create a storage account. Let's quickly do that. Again, you have to definitely choose a resource group. We do that. We have to give a name. Name should be unique. I have given some unique name to my storage account. Region is used East US. You can go in for a premium or a standard performance one. I'm going for a standard performance one. I told you about just the redundancy. You have LRS, GRS, ZRS, and GZRS. I'm going to go for the LRS option. It does not provide me high availability, but it is fine. It's just for demo purpose. And then you have different options of data protection and all. But just to respect the time, I quickly go on to review and I create it.
Yeah, I think how much time we need extra actually?
I
Just
know
to check.
it's just go on. Let me just cut on some content and I'll just take 10 more
Sure.
minutes.
Sure. Just I am trying to convey to joiners that how much time we may need. I think we started 5 minutes late. It's already 12:05. So whether 10-15 minutes will do?
Yeah,
I
not
think.
more than
Okay.
10, not more than
Okay,
10.
sure. I think hope everyone want little bit more information. If it is required 10-15 minutes of extension, I think that should be fine. Okay, thanks. Over to you.
I'll just quickly try to cover it up within 10 minutes only. All right, so I've created a storage account. I go on to my resource. You see, I have different storage options. I have containers, that basically means blob, file shares, queues, and tables that I just spoke about a couple of minutes back, right? I'm not going now that much into detail, and let me quickly do one thing. So what I'm doing is, um, you see, my aim is to create a blob container, right, and access it via the internet. So in that case, I have to select this particular blob anonymous access, and at the storage account it was disabled, so I quickly enabled it. I go into the container now. Let me first refresh it once. Okay, so I have container, so I click on container. Now I'm creating a blob within a container, right? So let me give a name blob to it, and I'm making it its access as blob anonymous, and I create it, right? So I have this blob. I go in within the blob, and now I'm going to upload some file from my on-prem machine, right, from a local machine. Let me do that. Let me quickly find some image. Okay. So this is the image that I've found, and I am uploading an image over here. And now the next quick task is to go within this image, and I'll try accessing this via the internet. So if I'm able to do that or not, right? So see, so the image that I uploaded from a local machine to blob storage, it is actually being accessed via the internet. And because I wanted its access via the internet, that is the reason, if you recall, I set it to blob anonymous. If I go onto the private anonymous, right? So if I have an option of changing the access level. So if I want to access it, let's suppose I don't want it to be public, so it's going to be private, no anonymous access. And in that case, if I try to access it via the internet, it'll give some error or something, right? But because I wanted it to be accessed, that is the reason I set it up to blob anonymous. That was the reason. I'm not going into access levels because it's going to take a little bit time more to explain, but yeah, that is what blob anonymous basically means. Now the next thing is, I'm not going on to the PPT now. So you have Azure files. So that is the next type of um, Azure storage type, right? So we have file shares. So basically what happens, it works on a SMB protocol, and it is basically used to manage the file shares, quickly letting you know certain purposes. Let's suppose it is used for lift and shifting your applications. So if you're moving into cloud with your applications and you want to store the files or the data out of it, so you can go ahead and you can store it in Azure file shares. And so yeah, that's one of the use cases of file share. And that's one use case, as in why you can use and how you can use Azure file share. Now the very first thing what I'm going to be doing is I'm again within the storage account, and I go to Azure file share. Now I'm creating a new file share. I can give any name to it, and I create it. So this task that I'm going to do is I'll try to create a shareable drive. That means I'm going to create a drive and I'm going to mount it to my virtual machine, and so that whatever data I upload over here on this particular file share, it gets reflected on my virtual machine. That's like a shareable drive. That was a demo due for today's session, right? So a file share has been created on my VM, and now the next thing that I'm going to do is quickly I'm going to upload a file. Oops, where did it go? File, share, upload. Right. So let me see, let me upload some quick file from my local machine. Okay. Okay, yeah. So okay, so what I've done is I've uploaded a file here from a local machine. It's getting uploaded and I uploaded over here. Now the next thing is I'll try to create a shareable drive on my VM. I want to mount it to my VM. So I have an option of connecting. If you come down, I'll see some PowerShell script over here. So quickly, uh, copy this and I go inside my virtual machine. Let me get my virtual machine from the other screen to here. I hope you're able to see the virtual machine now. So what I'll do, oops. I have this massive issue when I move the virtual machine to my next screen. I don't know what is the issue. Let me quickly reshare my screen now. All right, so I'm sharing the screen only now with you. So I go into my virtual machine. I hope my screen is visible now, and I go onto the PowerShell. All right, the script that I copied from my Azure file share, right, that I just created on the VM. I'm just quickly pasting that script over here. And let's try running this script and see what happens. Oops, why did I run it over here? I had open ISC, but I won't open that right now. I mean, you can use ISC or partial, it doesn't matter actually. But so I have copied the partial script and now I'm trying to run it over the PowerShell, right, on the VM. And you see, something has been created, a credential has been added. So let's see. So I go onto the file explorer of the Azure file, and you see I have this shareable drive that has come up. If I click on this by the name file share, so if you know, file share is nothing but the resource that I created on the virtual machine, right? So it's now sort of we're able to see that over here. And if I go in this, I can see this particular file that I had uploaded over there from my on-prem, and I'm able to see this that has some content within it. Welcome to today's session, right? Similarly, if I add something more now over there on the VM, it's going to be not on the VM, sorry, on my on-prem, it's going to be reflected over here, right? So what a shareable drive is all about. And I've mounted that over here in this virtual machine, and all my data gets saved over here. So that was actually the second demo also of today's session, which I quickly tried to cover. I would have made it more informative towards the end, but just to just to consider the timing, I have given this much demo. So that was pretty much it. And the whole idea of this session was to to just keep it basic and not go into that much in depth of it. So yeah, that was a quick go through and a navigation of how and Azure virtual machine and Azure storage sort of works. So, yeah, thank you once again. Please feel free to connect with me over the social media if you wish to. And yeah, once again to the entire UG, the user group, Goloknath and Sanjeev ji, thank you so much for inviting me. I see a question over there, so let
Yeah,
me just answer that here. So you
sure.
see, I had when I created, let me quickly go one step back. So I had a storage account in place, right? And after that, I had a file share. So this is the file share that I had actually created, if you recall, on the Azure portal. So I simply have to click on the file share and I get an connect option. And here, if I go down, I'll get a script, right? So I just have to copy this. This is the PowerShell script that I took and I pasted on my PowerShell of the Windows virtual machine. You have a different way also to add if you wish to, but I think this is very simple, just copying it and pasting it over there. Else you have some manual steps via which also we can create a shareable drive, but I followed this one. Yeah.
Okay, I think there is not much question. I think that is the what I have, and the recording regarding I already replied. Questions was there. Yeah, where to? Okay, I think okay. That's all. And thank you so much, actually, Navika, for taking accepting the request and joining us to provide some insights. And it's really helpful. To be very honest to everyone, actually, initially when Navika proposed this topic, I was saying it's a very basic. Why you are going ahead with this topic? So, but the thought process is it's a start of the month, and let's start with this to understand whoever don't know. Even few people are there. They don't know actually how the infrastructure running. They know application development, but they don't know what is all about. At least the basics of Azure. I think that will be helpful for them. In that note, I feel yes, it is helpful. And those who are not aware on this part, yeah, in that note, I'll just open the floor if anybody want to talk. Maybe I want to listen from Jiva and Sanjeev. Anything you guys want to say?
Oh, just wanted to say thank you. I mean, to be honest with you, this is not such a trivial topic. It can be very deep. The selections of the VMs, whether you're going to go with VMs or you're actually going to be serverless. What do you want to do in those compute scenarios? That itself is a whole, how do you say, PhD onto itself, and storage accounts, when you combine it with your data models, that itself is another whole topic. So thank you for, bringing this flavor to the BizApps group, because for me, I've been using storage accounts with apps every single day, because I read it into my Power App from my blob or my from Data Lake or whatever. So thank you. Learned a lot. Jiva, over to you, buddy. And please come
Yeah,
back, huh? Navika, please come back. Don't stop with this. You have like lots of goodness. So kindly come back
Thank
and
you.
enlighten us with more. Over
Definitely.
to you, Yeah. Over to you, Jiva.
yeah. I joined late. There is some confusion between the time zone difference, and sorry about that. I wanted to join the session from the beginning. When I saw the description, I don't want to miss any of that, but unfortunately, I missed it. I will go through the recording though, and I joined when you started creating the virtual machines and then showing how the files are accessed to directly, from outside the virtual machines. It could be quite basic, but that's what the principle. No, it to understand what is how the things are hosted and how the things are available when it comes to even between basic and premium subscriptions. And if you take things like Azure Function or anything like that, it's what
Mhm.
how it is done right behind the scene. So I think, like as Sanjeev said, for a BizApp project, nowadays it's mostly there's no implementations without Azure. Either Azure Integration Services or Azure Storage Services. Mostly we're using lots of integration services with BizApp projects and Power Platform projects. And I think this is a good place to start for that, for us to get into that realm and understand what's really going on behind the scene. And really, thanks for bringing this up. And Sanjeev said, we'd love to hear more things about Azure from you.
Sure, sure, definitely. I'm more into the infrastructure and the automation part of it. So,
Yeah.
but it's I could have taken some other topic of, best practice of security and all, but I thought that it's better to start with a topic that's pretty much basic, because I think
Yeah.
that caters to more people, and someone who's starting from the scratch, right? He can attend this session,
Right.
because if we go on to a little bit higher level, which I can definitely do an event on in future, but I think that's for the people who are already in it. But for the people who are not that much into it, I thought that this session would be helpful, and I hope that it was helpful. I know towards the end I had to quickly just wrap it up, but I tried my level best to share as much insights as possible.
No, no, this is very, very helpful. And please don't
Yeah.
consider it basic. This is anything but basic. When we run our BizApps projects, let me give you a simple example. If I actually want generative AI inside my app, and obviously I've got to go to Open AI, right? I mean, an Azure Open AI, because I want to bring the model and not my data. And I need to consume that in my app. Well, guess what? I need to set up my management. I'm terribly sorry. My kid just walked in. So I need to set up my management groups. I need to set up my resource groups, and there has to be a logical structure to it in the enterprise. Of course, on my own, I can do whatever I want. But if you want to plan it in an enterprise, you need to plan your subscriptions in a particular way aligned to your business model. Otherwise, it's going to be all over the place. So that one slide that you showed, where you had the management group up top, then you had your resource groups and down to the resources, that is a critical slide for anybody who's actually planning, and they need to consult the business as to how they want to structure it. Like, do you want the resource group by your solutions, or do you want the resource group by products? Right? I could have a whole bunch of SQL servers in a resource group and not know which solution the SQL server is serving, right? So you
Mhm.
bring up excellent, excellent points. And in fact, actually, I wish people spend more time on that, because that is what like larger enterprises care about. When you have multiple countries to serve, when you have multiple business units to serve, it is not as trivial as writing a PowerShell script. You have to
Yeah.
have deep level of planning, otherwise it'll be massive chaos. And I see that every day in biz apps, where they dump a whole bunch of applications in the default environment. And then everybody is searching, what should I do? There's no planning, there is no program. So what you bring up is, I mean, people spend months on this to come up with a proper strategy. So thank you for that. And please don't say basic. It is anything but basic. It is not
Yeah,
basic.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
think that's really helpful actually. Just to add on, Sanjeev, I remember one of the customers saying how much my ingress egress cost. You are saying BizApps will be sitting this is my BizApps cost, this is licensing cost, this is that cost. What is my ingress egress cost? So basically, if they don't know where exactly the costing and other things, because it's sitting on top of Azure, and definitely all those things will come as long as they know where exactly how to fit it to provide optimized solution, or else I think Sanjeev, you understand, right? So customer may think, okay, I have this many cost I need to bear, but subsequently it is keep on adding. So that's really helpful to understand also the infra part. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I
It is a
think there is
must,
one.
guys. It is a
Yeah,
must. So thank you.
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
take
just
I
myself.
think,
There is a
uh,
question on the chat.
yeah. That's
just
what I'm
one
saying.
request from my side. Sorry. Yeah, I know we're running out of time. Since Navika bought that, about she was considering about getting the best practices in terms of security, and I really like to place the request that please do that session, and
Yeah,
when it's possible, best practices on security and performance, and how
Yeah,
to
yeah,
set.
definitely.
Yeah,
that
and that's
that
some.
is something that I do on a daily basis. And even I think one very important topic which we tend to forget is cost management. I think that is also something that
Yeah,
we can plan it out, how to
yeah,
make how to manage your cost and what are the parameters to look in for and stuff, and then definitely security and all. I also, when while I was just thinking of giving this session, I thought of doing it the other way because, okay, we are creating, resources via the portal right now, but that's definitely not an efficient solution when we work on a big infrastructure, right? So I think, yeah, it's also good to do sessions on ISC, as
mm,
to how you can automate the entire process. Because in companies we have proper testing and production environments, it is not a good practice to do it, create resources and integrate it on
yeah,
manually. So it's better to click one trigger a pipeline and that
yeah.
everything gets treated at the first place by just making certain parameter changes. So I think that's also something that can be considered in the future of we can do some
Nice.
ISC or something. Yeah.
Yeah, you would prefer Bicep or Terraform for that?
Um, Bicep, because that's what I've mostly,
Okay, perfect.
I'm a lot into Azure DevOps.
Yeah,
I've been using that for the longest time now. Um, Honestly speaking, there's going to be a bit weird, but I'm more of an template of a person.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't know. I find it very easy to, quickly get an ARM template for a resource. Though I know Bicep has been recently introduced and it's pretty much good. If someone is not aware of ARM templates, I think he should start with Biceps because it's pretty
Sweet.
much easy to use. But yeah, so yeah,
Thanks. Yeah, thanks
mostly.
for that. Yeah, these are all like the big great things to have in our user group. And yeah, appreciate it whenever you have time, like, you can let us know and we can definitely plan upfront and we can plan our marketing also way upfront than this time. And definitely we can make it much bigger in the coming sessions. Since
For
people
sure.
people are waking up from the long vacation, so this month is quite less number of people than we expect. Yeah.
yeah. Actually, Navika, there is one question in the chat. Would you like to answer this, or I think with interest of time, you see if it is a quick one, you can answer, or else he's saying it's not.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, Shafiruddin, I guess in the interest of time, you could reach out to me on LinkedIn. Maybe
yeah,
just,
sure,
in a couple of minutes and we can carry on the conversation over there. I'll
sure,
just take
sure.
question is this. All right.
Okay, I think, okay, thank you everyone for joining the session. And I understand it's already 25 minutes extra, but I think this is helpful for everyone to know something. To discussion also helpful. In that note, thanks again, Navika, for joining and accepting our invite. Looking towards for more in-depth sessions also. But yeah, this is also really helpful. Even I also understood up to some extent, to be very honest, because I need to reach out to my infra also. Hey, what to do this part? So I think it's makes sense. What is the optimized solution? Other things. It is really helpful. Thanks again, and thanks everyone for joining. And happy weekend, whatever the available. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you
Thank
so much
you.
once
Thank you.
again,
Bye.
Bye
everyone.
bye.
Thank you. Bye
Bye.
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 Take care.
Thank you.
Cheers.